Never before seen photos and video connected to the investigation into the murder of rapper Tupac Shakur.
New video shows Tupac Shakur and Marion Suge Knight leaving the MGM Grand after a fight involving a rival gang. The video, part of evidence shown to a Las Vegas grand jury, leading the panel to indict Dwayne Keefe D. Davis in Shakur's murder.
New extended and unseen surveillance footage from the night that Tupac was shot has been released during the court case of Keefe D, with the CCTV timestamp only showing the time of Orlando Anderson being beaten down and the immediate exit of Tupac and Suge Knight. What was not shown was the extended footage of the MGM Grand lobby bar, which LAPD detective Russell Paul had claimed showed Orlando Anderson at the bar during the time of the Tupac shooting taking place. Russell Paul's police reports were declassified on the FBI website, which also detail witnesses as pinpointing Orlando Anderson at the MGM Grand lobby bar during the time of the shooting. The documentary called Tupac and Biggie Murders: What Really Happened, produced by Amplified, has documentary filmmaker RJ Bond describing how Russell Paul had confirmed of how the Las Vegas PD had reviewed the MGM Grand surveillance footage, which had Orlando Anderson placed at the MGM Grand lobby bar during the time of the shooting. With Keefe D being arrested in 2023 for going on several platforms claiming he was in the car with Orlando Anderson when the shooting was carried out, he has since taken back his claims, with his lawyers now using Suge Knight's statements to TMZ being of Orlando Anderson not being the shooter, in an attempt to convey that Keefe D had made up the claims. Keefe D was initially pressured by a governmental task force to make a confession which placed Orlando Anderson behind the murder weapon or serve a near-to-life prison sentence. He now claims in court that he had made up the story after being pressured to, and continued with the claims to earn money from what he had called entertainment purposes, being on several TV shows and internet platforms. In this video, we will take a look into the reports which place Orlando Anderson elsewhere during the time of the shooting, and the alternative theories put forward of the Tupac murder. The theory of the Crips murdering Tupac is based around an assault which took place on Orlando Anderson being 2 hours and 27 minutes before the shooting, with the theory claiming it was a revenge killing. The story was later believed to have been explained by Keefe D in a secret recording made by a governmental task force in 2009. Tupac's father, Billy Garland, questioned the motives of the governmental task force in an interview with YouTube channel Art of Dialogue, as the task force was set up to disprove police involvement in the case of Biggie Smalls being connected to the murder of Tupac. The task force was appointed by the US government in 2008 and given to a former LAPD cop called Greg Kading to disprove police involvement in the unsolved cases. The LAPD in the city of Los Angeles were facing a $500 million wrongful death lawsuit which was filed by Biggie's family, which had been based on the evidence of Russell Paul. Russell Paul was an LAPD detective who was involved in investigating the murder of Biggie Smalls and put forward evidence of corrupt cops from the LAPD Rampart Division as being behind the death of Biggie. The governmental task force was set up to disprove the Russell Paul theory so the $500 million lawsuit could disappear. Greg Kading's task force started to reinvestigate the Biggie Smalls murder and saw Keefe D as a person of interest, as he was at the party Biggie was at before being shot, and there had even been reports of the Crips killing Biggie due to an unpaid debt by Puffy for the murder of Tupac. Keefe D was also a person of interest in the Tupac case, as he was the uncle to Orlando Anderson and was in Las Vegas during the time of the shooting. The task force set up Keefe D in a large purchase of drugs in a sting operation, which some consider as entrapment, which gave him the option of a 25-year prison sentence or a proffer agreement. A proffer agreement is immunity of a crime when confessing, with the immunity only acting within a task force being confessed to, allowing criminals to avoid jail time through confessing to a crime. Keefe D was given immunity in discussing what he knew about the Biggie Smalls murder, which led to him talking about the Tupac murder instead. The task force, when Keefe D was going to give an account of the Tupac murder, firstly made him retract his previous claims which he had made to the FBI in 1998. Keefe D in 1998 was approached by the FBI to confess to the Tupac murder, but he had told them that the Crips had nothing to do with it. Keefe D had now claimed a different story to the task force in order to get out of a 25-year prison sentence. Keefe D had no idea that his claims were secretly being recorded by the task force and was later released in Greg Kading's 2015 documentary called Murder Rap. Keefe D in the confession claimed he was in Las Vegas the night before the shooting, being with a New York hustler called Eric Zip Martin. Keefe D claimed Zip was responsible for introducing him to Puff Daddy in the early 90s. Keefe D claimed Southside Compton Crips Orlando Anderson, DeAndre Smith, and Terrence Brown drove to Las Vegas the following day on the 7th, being in a white Cadillac, which was rented under the name of Terrence Brown's mother-in-law. Hotel receipts show another Southside Compton Crip called Corey Edwards had also checked into a hotel the night before the shooting. Keefe D told the task force that the Crips had gone to Las Vegas to watch a Mike Tyson fight within the MGM Grand. Keefe D in a 2021 interview with YouTube channel Art of Dialogue claimed he had gotten tickets to the fight off a scalper. Author Kathy Scott claimed the police had found out that Orlando Anderson didn't have a ticket to the fight. Tupac and Suge Knight, along with Blood gang members from Suge Knight's neighborhood set of the Compton MOB Pyrus, had also attended the fight. Trayvon Lane was one of the Bloods who had recently had a confrontation in a Foot Locker store with Orlando Anderson after the Southside Compton Crips attempted to steal the death row chain off of Trayvon's neck. Rumors spread on the streets of Compton that Puff Daddy had placed bounties on the death row chains, but Keefe D clarified in an Art of Dialogue interview that this was an untrue rumor, which made the East Coast-West Coast war worse. Orlando Anderson and the Southside Compton Crips were affiliated with Puffy, as Keefe D had claimed that they would hang out together when Puffy would go to California. Tupac's bodyguard Frank Alexander claimed Trayvon Lane had told Tupac about Orlando Anderson after spotting him in the lobby after leaving the fight, causing Tupac to be the first person to run over and attack him, followed by Suge Knight and the Bloods. Keefe D claimed the plan was to meet at a cafe in the MGM Grand after the fight, with him claiming in an Art of Dialogue interview that while at the cafe a member from the South LA 118 East Block Crips had come over to him and told him that Orlando Anderson had just been jumped by death row. Orlando Anderson is on tape at 8:55 p.m. being questioned by police in the MGM Grand lobby, with Keefe D claiming he had met up with Orlando Anderson there shortly after. This is where the timeline of the Crips becomes mixed up, as several different versions of events have been put forward. Keefe D in his recorded confession tape claimed at 9 p.m. that he and the Crips went outside to the MGM Grand's parking lot to go to Zip Martin's Mercedes and collect a gun. In a 2019 Vlad TV interview, Keefe D had recanted these claims about Zip and had followed up in a 2021 Art of Dialogue interview, claiming he had people with guns out there from Las Vegas who he was doing business with. Keefe D's story becomes mixed up here, as in his recorded confession, he had claimed it was in the parking lot with Zip where he was told that Tupac and Suge Knight were going to be at a nightclub called Club 662. However, in his Art of Dialogue interview, he had claimed that the people in Las Vegas who he was doing business with were the ones to tell him about Club 662. An LA Times article reports Treasure Island Hotel security escorting Orlando Anderson to a hotel room at 10:13 p.m. being under the hotel's policy, although this was not Orlando Anderson's hotel he was staying at, as he was staying in the Excalibur, with reports claiming he was meeting up with Crips and associates at the hotel. This is where Keefe D claimed in his 2021 Art of Dialogue interview of the Las Vegas associates laying out 3 guns to be used for retaliation, which counters the claims he made of Zip in his recorded confession. Keefe D's recorded confession to Greg Kading did not mention this part, as he had claimed to have gotten the weapon from Zip instead, which helped with tying the murder into Puff Daddy, which Keefe D claimed in an Art of Dialogue interview that Greg Kading was trying to do. In both the recorded confession and the Art of Dialogue interview, Keefe D claimed after the story with the guns that himself and the Crips, along with the people from Las Vegas, had drove to Club 662 and waited outside. Mob James, being at MOB Compton Piru, was working security at the door of the club and confirmed in his interview for Vlad TV of seeing the Crips outside Club 662 in multiple vehicles. Keefe D in his recorded confession to Greg Kading had claimed that he had waited 15 to 20 minutes in the parking lot of Club 662, but Tupac and Suge Knight had never showed up. In his Art of Dialogue interview, however, he had claimed that he had waited around an hour. Either of Keefe D's claims changed the timeline depending on which story you follow. The Zip story of getting the guns in the parking lot would place an 11-minute drive from the MGM Grand parking lot to Club 662 at 9 PM, then waiting at Club 662 for around 20 minutes, making it around 9:31 PM. The story of the Treasure Island Hotel paints a different timeline, as it is a 12-minute drive at 10:13 PM to Club 662, with him then claiming to have waited an hour, making it 11:13 PM. Corey Edwards, who was with the Crips outside Club 662, also confirmed that they had waited around an hour, which once again discredits Keefe's story about Zip. Corey Edwards and the associates from Las Vegas had gotten into a van and returned to the Treasure Island Hotel, while Keefe D claimed to have gotten in a white Cadillac with Orlando Anderson, DeAndre Smith, and Terrence Brown, who then took a 5-minute drive to Crown Liquor. This would give a timeline of 9:36 PM under the Zip story, with them claiming to have seen Tupac directly after, which didn't occur until 11:19 PM. Under the Treasure Island story told to the Art of Dialogue and reported in the LA Times, it gives the timeline of 11:18 PM, with the shooting occurring a minute later, as Keefe D claimed they saw Tupac hanging out the sunroof of the BMW. However, it is a 4-minute drive from Crown Liquor to Flamingo Road where the shooting had taken place, but with Keefe D claiming they waited for around an hour, some time can be removed, which makes the Treasure Island story more believable than the Zip story. Keefe D, however, made a claim to the Art of Dialogue of Orlando Anderson going to the hospital for treatment. Keefe D in his Art of Dialogue interview claimed Orlando Anderson had went to the hospital after the fight due to an injured shoulder, and they had put him in a sling. The LA Times report places Orlando Anderson at the Treasure Island Hotel at 10:13 PM, meaning it was sometime after this. This was confirmed by the Sunrise Hospital in a fax to the Las Vegas PD, being in Orlando Anderson's medical records for treatment of a dislocated shoulder. The medical records confirm Orlando Anderson being treated, but the full version, including his checkout time, has not been made available to the public. It has been confirmed that the wait time of a non-critical injury at the Sunrise Hospital is at least an hour wait on busy days, such as being on a fight night. If Orlando Anderson were to leave the hotel for the hospital, it is a 12-minute drive to the hospital, making it 10:25 PM, and then an hour wait in treatment, putting it past 11:25 PM, which would have placed it after the shooting had taken place. If he went to the hospital directly after leaving the MGM Grand at 9 PM, it would have placed him as leaving the hospital at around 10:12 PM, with an additional 12-minute drive to the Treasure Island Hotel, making the time of arrival 10:24 PM, but he was reported by security as being there at 10:13 PM, making this impossible. An LA Times article in an interview carried out with Anderson claimed, quote, Anderson said because his injuries were so severe, he couldn't have followed the entourage, and records show he had treatment on his shoulder, unquote. This would indicate that Orlando Anderson was not at the scene unless treatment had taken place after the shooting. Keefe D told the governmental task force that Orlando Anderson carried out the shooting after they had seen Tupac hanging out the sunroof of the BMW when leaving Crown Liquor, and they had taken a 9-minute drive to the carriage house after the shooting, where they had dropped off the car and then walked back to the hotel when had gotten drunk. In the documentary Tupac and Biggie Murders: What Really Happened, produced by Amplified, documentary filmmaker RJ Bond describes there being multiple stories of where Orlando Anderson had went after the fight, with it showing police reports of witnesses placing Orlando Anderson at the MGM Grand Lobby bar during the time of the shooting. RJ Bond also claimed in a documentary that Russell Paul had found out that the Las Vegas PD had checked the CCTV at the MGM Grand, which placed Orlando Anderson at the lobby bar during the time of the shooting. Suge Knight, in a 2023 prison interview with TMZ, claimed Orlando Anderson was not the shooter of Tupac. People have believed DeAndre Smith may have been the shooter instead of Orlando Anderson, with Keefe D being questioned about this in an Art of Dialogue interview, with his response being, "Are you trying to put me in jail?" This was as he couldn't have been found as been lying during the proffer agreement. Keefe D in early 2024 while in court for the Tupac murder after being arrested in 2023 for going on several TV and internet platforms claiming Orlando Anderson was the shooter, recanted his story and claimed that he had made it up to get out of the task force life sentence against him, then followed up with the claims on platforms for entertainment purposes to make money after seeing how successful Greg Kading was in profiting from the story. Keefe D's lawyers used Suge Knight's claims of Orlando Anderson not being the shooter as a way of trying to show that Keefe D was lying about being involved in murdering Tupac, with hopes of him being found not guilty of the crime. Suge Knight in 2018 was interviewed from prison by Russell Paul's co-author Michael Douglas Carlin. Michael Douglas Carlin and Russell Paul had wrote a book called Chaos Merchants, which details police involvement in the murders of Tupac and Biggie. The book had been released after Russell Paul's sudden death, which took place in the LA County Sheriff's Office, after Russell Paul had gone there in 2015 to present new evidence on the cases. It was Russell Paul's evidence of police involvement which had opened the $500 million wrongful death lawsuit by Biggie's family against the LAPD, from which the government task force used Greg Kading to disprove the theory, which led to the setup of Keefe D getting the Tupac confession out of him. In Suge Knight's 2018 prison interview with Russell Paul's co-author Michael Douglas Carlin, he for the first time claimed Orlando Anderson was not the shooter, and had followed up by saying Perez and them was all involved. This was in reference to Rafael Perez, who is an LAPD Rampart cop and has been connected to death row by prior associates such as Snoop Dogg's cousin Joe Cool, along with artist C-Style, who had both identified Rafael Perez as supplying security for death row, being during their interviews for the 2021 documentary called Last Man Standing. Kevin Hackey was a former Compton School District police officer who was used by the FBI and the ATF to provide information to them by infiltrating death row record security by posing as a bodyguard. Kevin Hackey had also claimed to have seen Rafael Perez working security for death row. The Rampart Division is a section of the LAPD which patrols west of downtown Los Angeles and had an anti-gang unit known as Crash. The Rampart scandal came to light between 1998 and 2000 after Rafael Perez was arrested for stealing from the evidence locker and went on to expose the Rampart scandal for a reduced sentence. Rafael Perez implicated 70 officers in forms of corruption, which had included lying on the stand and stealing from the evidence lockers. Death Row's head of security was a former Compton cop called Reggie Wright Jr., whose father was the head of Compton's gang division. Reggie Wright Jr. employed police officers from several departments to supply security for Death Row Records, being under Right Ways Protective Services, but had no known official connection to the Rampart Division. Death Row Records management, known as Nightlife Management, which was owned by Suge Knight's wife and employed managers such as Norris Anderson, had a known connection into the Rampart Division. Sharifa Knight, who was Suge Knight's wife until 1996, began to have an affair with a Rampart cop called Kevin Gaines in 1994. Sharifa Knight was asked by Reggie Wright Jr. if she had ever cut any checks to Kevin Gaines from Nightlife after a documentary claimed to have obtained checks cut from Nightlife Management to Kevin Gaines. Sharifa Knight's account was with Kentron, which was a company by Death Row Records criminal defense attorney David Kenner, who she had claimed would not have cut any checks to Kevin Gaines.
I was with Cantron and they wouldn't have given no check.
Death Row Records' former head of security joined the call when asking Sharifa about the claims, then questioned if David Kenner had been paying the division after hearing that Kenner was supposed to make some comps to Kevin Gaines.
I wonder if Cantrock and Kenner was paying. Didn't we hear something about they supposed to do some comps?
Comps are when work is done without payment, with services or goods being offered instead. Sharifa claimed that she only remembers cutting one check for Kevin Gaines which had came from her personal account, which was going to be transferred to Kevin Gaines as a payment from Death Row Records manager Norris Anderson.
Did you ever give Norris the money, or he didn't get it?
No, he took the money back. I said, now they've changed their mind. They don't need it, because I got a call and said, never mind.
She claimed that the check was discarded as Gaines went on to cancel whatever transaction was going to take place, with Norris Anderson telling Sharifa that the cops no longer needed the money. Suge Knight, in his prison interview with Michael Douglas Carlin, when claiming that Perez and them was all involved, had also mentioned Death Row security and management as conspiring with the cops in the plot, with Suge Knight claiming that they were trying to kill him too in an attempt to take over his company. Sharifa Knight, in an audio when questioned on paying Kevin Gaines, says technically nobody knew about the whole Vegas thing.
Technically nobody knew about the whole Vegas.
No, let me just say that.
The classified FBI reports show that Kevin Gaines was in Las Vegas on a special assignment for the LAPD, being during the time that Tupac was shot. Orlando Anderson in an interview had claimed that he felt as if he was being used as a scapegoat for the Tupac murder.
I mean, I've been thinking, maybe I'm a scapegoat or something. I just want to let everybody know, I didn't do it.
This fight involving Tupac and a rival Crip gang member at the MGM Hotel was staged so the rival could later be blamed for Tupac's murder.
Tupac's father, in an Art of Dialogue interview when questioned on the arrest of Keefe D, claimed Keefe D was just a tool and blamed the LAPD and the Vegas PD for the death of Tupac. Tupac's brother Mopreme Shakur also claimed in an interview that he feels as if it was the cops that killed Tupac and how Orlando Anderson was a pawn in the murder.
Do you have any ideas as who you think assassinated Pac? Any suspicions about anything at all? Because I know a lot of people have their own theories and so forth. But what is Mopreme Shakur's views on who assassinated Pac? Cops.
Suge Knight claimed in his prison interview with Michael Douglas Carlin that if you watch the CCTV footage, you can see people stalking Tupac, claiming there was already a plan there to do something to him.
If you go back and watch the film, they was already stalking Pac. There was a plan already to do something to him.
This has led to people such as Michael Douglas Carlin analysing the footage in attempts to make connections to the theory. Larry Finch was a cop of the Compton School District Police Department, which was Kevin Hackey's former division. Larry's brother Bobby Finch, who was a bodyguard, was murdered in a drive-by shooting, being on the same day Tupac had died from his injuries. Bobby Finch was the neighbor to Corey Edwards, who was with the Southside Compton Crips in Las Vegas, and had initially told the police that Orlando Anderson was at the MGM Grand Lobby bar during the time of the shooting. Corey Edwards had warned Bobby Finch that the neighborhood was getting dangerous from the events in Las Vegas, and some believe that Bobby Finch may have been confused for Corey Edwards. Bobby Finch was killed in a drive-by shooting, being shot 13 times in an unsolved murder, with the killer never being identified. The murder, which occurred on the Southside Compton Crips territory on the same day that Tupac had died, erupted a gang war between the Southside Compton Crips and the MOB Compton Piru Bloods, as the Bloods were blamed for Bobby Finch's murder. Michael Douglas Carlin claimed he believes cops were implicated in the death of Bobby Finch in order to stage the gang war between the two sets to fit the narrative of the Bloods vs. Crips.
13 rounds, 12 hit Bobby. Maybe they're protected by cops. Maybe he was shot by a cop.
Author John Potash believes Rampart cops killed Tupac and claimed it was the same division of the LAPD who were linked to the CIA, which assisted with the Robert Kennedy assassination in the late 60s.
The cops that assassinated Tupac were mostly from the Ramparts Division. That's one of 18 Los Angeles police divisions. The Ramparts Division was the division found to work with the CIA to assassinate Robert F. Kennedy.
John Potash, in an interview on the Sean Atwood podcast, claimed that Russell Paul had concluded that allegedly the same cops who had killed Tupac then killed Biggie to cover it up. Suge Knight had made these same claims in 2 different prison interviews. Suge Knight, in a 2017 prison interview for the Fox TV documentary Who Shot Biggie and Tupac, claimed if you solve the first case, you might solve the second.
Sometimes if you solve the first case, you might solve the second case. But that never happened, correct?
Yep.
In his 2018 prison interview with Michael Douglas Carlin, Suge Knight claimed the same circle of people were behind the murders of Biggie and Tupac when expanding on the claims of Rafael Perez.
And the other thing is for Biggie's side, that they saw the first one, they saw the second one, because it's the same people, same circle of people.
The 2005 wrongful death lawsuit for $500 million against the LAPD by Biggie's family was based on Russell Paul's evidence, which listed Rampart cops such as Rafael Perez and David Mack as allegedly being involved in the murder of Biggie Smalls. Rafael Perez's cellmate Kenneth Bewagny's statements were included as official court documents, where Kenneth claimed Perez had allegedly told him that Kevin Gaines was in a car which was supposed to intercept Puff Daddy's vehicle but had failed. The murder rap documentary acknowledges a white Jeep which attempted to intercept the convoy but had failed. Kevin Gaines was murdered by a fellow cop called Frank Liger, being 9 days after the Biggie Smalls murder. The investigation into his death had found pictures of Suge Knight and Tupac taped to the back of his locker and also exposed his affair with Sharifa Knight. A memo which was released, written by an assistant officer to LAPD Chief L. Pasinger, describes how after Kevin Gaines' murder, when a race motive was attempting to be pushed against Frank Liger, Liger was threatening to go to the media in claiming the murder of Kevin Gaines was a sanctioned hit by the LAPD to cover up corruption. Russell Paul, in the 2002 documentary Biggie and Tupac, claimed he had had evidence which indicated how the cops had allegedly used radios and monitored police frequencies in order to pull off the Biggie Smalls murder. The 2016 TV series Case Closed by AJ Benza looks into the coup d'etat overthrow theory of Death Row Records, which cited Tupac's bodyguard Michael Moore's claims of hearing the words "Gotham" allegedly coming over a radio used for security being during the time of the Tupac shooting, which Michael Douglas Carlin indicates in the series that radios and spotters may have been used in the Tupac murder also.
Michael Moore heard "Got 'em" come over the radio, so clearly there were spotters. There were people who were telling everybody that was in on it what was happening, kind of a play-by-play over the radio.
The declassified FBI documents on the Biggie Smalls murder claim the same tactics were allegedly used by the cops in a prior historic crime, with some believing it to be the Tupac murder. Others believe it may have been a bank robbery David Mack had carried out 8 months after the Biggie Smalls murder, where he had stole over $700,000, which Perez's former cellmate claimed was used to pay the triggerman after the cops were shorted for the money by the people behind the hit. It was during the police search for the bank robbery where the same vehicle type and ammo type were found at David Mack's home, which had matched the shooter of the Biggie murder. The overthrow theory, which Suge Knight himself had put forward in a 2018 prison interview, goes on to expand into the industry theory. The industry theory digs deeper into the overthrow theory put forward by Suge Knight in 2018 and looks into the idea of star whackers. Actor Randy Quaid put this term forward, claiming that unknowingly some stars in Hollywood have been taken advantage of or further destroyed by what Quaid claimed is made up of Hollywood attorneys, estate planners and others who make large amounts of money off of the downfall of celebrities. Tupac and his accounts were in the hands of Interscope Records, who Tupac had been signed to, with Tupac dying broke due to money which was owed to him from a deal he had made to get out of prison. Tupac was bailed out of prison in October of 1995 by an appeal filed by death row criminal defense attorney David Kenner. Keefe D revealed how he had met David Kenner in 1991 after David Kenner had come to collect $600,000 of Crip-associated Compton kingpin Pat Johnson's money, which had gone towards the funding of starting Death Row Records, which was allegedly then laundered through Interscope. Artist Delray Richardson had showed paperwork on a YouTube channel, Art of Dialogue, which showed how Tupac was not actually signed to Death Row Records and had his Interscope contract updated to a 3-album fulfillment under Death Row. Tupac's new contract granted Interscope power of attorney and cited Tupac's independent label Out of the Gutter Records as an agreement between an independent label and Interscope when signing power of attorney over to Interscope. Tupac would receive power of attorney back upon fulfilling the 3-album agreement, with the music being made with Death Row Records and distributed by Interscope. Suge Knight had gotten $1.4 million from Interscope, which had came from Tupac's 1994 Me Against the World album, which was distributed by Interscope, meaning Tupac had technically bailed himself out of prison, making it look as if it was Death Row. Tupac, from July 8th to August 12th, 1996, had completed his 3rd album, with his prior being a double album, which meant that upon release, Tupac would get back power of attorney and would be released from his contract with Interscope under Death Row Records. Tupac, in the last 2 weeks of August 1996, being 2 weeks after completing the album which would release him from his contract, had fired David Kenner as his lawyer and had also fired Reggie Wright Jr. as his security after his family had told him having David Kenner as his lawyer was a conflict of interest due to Kenner's work with Death Row. David Kenner owned Kentron, which held the financial accounts of Death Row's subsidiaries such as Nightlife Management, with Nightlife Management being owned by Suge Knight's ex-wife Sharifa Knight. Death Row artist Snoop Dogg revealed in an interview with BET's Death Row Chronicles how his financial accounts were handled by Nightlife Management, which was being held by Kentron, owned by David Kenner, with Snoop Dogg revealing he never knew how much money he had actually earned. Tupac's sales earnings in August of 1996 was $70 million under Death Row Records, which was 50% split with Interscope, but Tupac was yet to see any of the money, with his former manager and business partner Tracy Robinson revealing that in August of 1996, Tupac had begun the process of filing an audit on Death Row Records to see where his money was. Tupac's bodyguard Michael Moore, seen with him here in this picture 3 days before being shot, revealed that he was in the room prior to the picture being taken on the 4th of September 1996, when Tupac had told Suge Knight that once his 3rd album Machiavelli was released, he would be leaving Death Row and starting Machiavelli Records. 2 weeks before Tupac had been shot, he had charges set against him which would have revoked his appeal agreement and sent him back to prison. Authors John Potash and Randall Sullivan claim that the charges were brought up by cops due to Tupac's smoking habit, which was being enabled by Death Row. The charges were placed against him in Los Angeles, where Tupac already had 2 strikes, meaning this case would have revoked his appeal and landed him back in prison. David Kenner had the case moved to Las Vegas to get around the 3 strikes law, with the penalty then being lowered to community service. David Kenner and a Las Vegas attorney by the name of George Kalisis created conditions which were approved by a judge for the community service, where it was agreed that Tupac would have to perform a benefit gig for a Las Vegas Metro police officer called Patrick Barry, being on September 7th, 1996 to complete the community service. Cop Patrick Barry was a Las Vegas Metro police officer whose wife was a prison officer who was connected to the Federal Bureau of Prisons. The community service benefit gig for Tupac was to be held at Club 662, which George Kalisis was the business attorney for, with him also being a criminal defense attorney representing crooked cops in Las Vegas who he helped get off of corruption charges. George Kalisis also knew Suge Knight's financial advisor David Chesnoff, who was also a criminal defense attorney based in Las Vegas. Suge Knight's financial advisors were David Chesnoff and Steve Steiner, who are under the umbrella of the legal team with David Kenner. Chesnoff and Steiner were a part of the previous law firm of the once mayor of Las Vegas Oscar Goodman, who was known for representing members of the Italian violent organized crime families of La Cosa Nostra. Tupac and Suge Knight were traveling to Club 662 for Tupac to serve the community service when they were shot at. Bodyguards Michael Moore and Frank Alexander went to a security meeting on the day of the shooting, where they were told by Khaleesi and others not to carry their weapons that night. Michael Moore refused and was taken off of Tupac and was made to stay at Club 662 instead. Mob James, who was working security on the door of Club 662, claimed in his Vlad TV interview that days prior to the Vegas trip, he was briefed on how Orlando Anderson and the Southside Compton Crips were going to be in Las Vegas. Michael Moore, who was removed from Tupac, claimed to have heard the words "Gotham" followed by "Don't say nothing over the radio" come over a security radio system during the time of the shooting. The 2007 documentary Tupac Assassination: Conspiracy or Revenge claimed Michael Moore had later said that the second voice was allegedly that of David Kenner's. Former Death Row Records artist Danny Boy, in an Art of Dialogue interview from 2021, claimed that David Kenner had a connection to trained specialist killers, which he had hired and flaunted in February of 1996, as he had alerted Danny Boy to multiple snipers in 3 different directions who were in communication, which were plotted around the SNL building of 30 Rockefeller Plaza, who were protecting Death Row in New York while performing on Saturday Night Live. Danny Boy claimed they were not regular police security for Death Row Records from Los Angeles or Suge Knight's Blood Homeboy security, but an external group of professionals. After the Tupac shooting, multiple people were responsible for leaking information to LA Times reporter Chuck Phillips, being that the Crips killed Tupac. David Kenner, in an unrelated case, was found guilty in January of 2024 for leaking grand jury information to reporters. The MGM Grand tape of Orlando Anderson getting beaten down was made available to the public and spread throughout the media after David Kenner had entered it into evidence for Suge Knight's probation violation case, being in October of 1996. Suge Knight had been on probation for what he claimed was a gun charge he had taken for Dr. Dre, and Suge Knight was able to avoid jail time due to his connection to a prosecutor called Lawrence M. Longo, also known as Larry Longo. Suge Knight violated his probation after being seen kicking Orlando Anderson in the MGM Grand tape, which was entered into evidence by David Kenner in October of 1996. Suge Knight during this time turned over control of his accounts of $500 million along with his investments to his financial advisors, being David Chesnoff and Steve Steiner, who were serving on his legal team with David Kenner. The $500 million company accounts were now under the umbrella of Kentron, with an additional $13 million being churned out in legal fees going to the law offices of Kenner shared between the parties. In Suge Knight's 2018 prison interview with Michael Douglas Carlin, he claimed that an accounting firm who Jimmy Iovine had introduced him to had stole between $30 to $40 million from Death Row's accounts, being after he had turned control over while going through the court system.
I had caught the accounting firm who Jimmy introduced us to. They stole $30-40 million.
Suge Knight revealed that they were giving Kenner $100,000 a month, which Jimmy Iovine was then getting a kickback from.
They was giving David $100,000 a month, and David said he was giving Jimmy a kickback from the $100,000 a month.
Suge Knight also claimed that he was not supposed to go to prison for the probation violation, which he had been sentenced to 9 years for, but feels as if he was set up by those involved in handling the case.
I never should have went to prison the first time I went to prison. They just played with the thing the way they wanted to play with it. So we was paying him for all the work he did as an attorney, and they was giving him $100,000 a month. That played an effect on me getting a violation when I shouldn't have got a violation.
This came after David Kenner had created a conflict of interest between Suge Knight and prosecutor Larry Longo, as David Kenner had moved Suge Knight into a Malibu beach house owned by Longo and gave Larry's daughter's tape to Suge Knight, promising her a record deal to be the first white artist on Death Row if Suge Knight were to keep staying out of jail from Longo's assistance. LA Times reporter Chuck Phillips, from whoever was leaking information to him, had had wrote an article about the conflict of interest, which was now made apparent to the grand jury and seen as a form of bribery, which added towards Suge Knight's guilty sentence in his probation violation. Suge Knight was sentenced to 9 years in prison, which had made him hand his accounts over to his financial advisors under David Kenner, while giving company operations over to death row artist Misha Lay, along with former Compton cop Reggie Wright Jr., who was getting advice from David Kenner. Suge Knight, in his 2018 interview with Michael Douglas Carlin, claimed he believes there was a conspiracy against him in 1996, which was to gain control over his company.
All the stuff really comes from because they want the ownership of my company. That's all that happened.
It goes all back to 1996.
Right.
He had tied this same theory in with the cop theory mentioned earlier, with him alleging in the interview that elements of management and security were behind the shooting, which was an attempt to murder him too, with him further claiming it was the same circle of people who had murdered Biggie 6 months later to cover it up. Tupac's third album, which was set to get him out of his power of attorney contract with Interscope and away from Death Row Records, was released 2 months after his death, with it being distributed by Interscope and going platinum within 2 weeks. Suge Knight, in the Showtime documentary American Dream, American Nightmare, claimed Jimmy Iovine had told him after Tupac had died that he had hit the jackpot, saying you can't beat a dead man's cells.
When Jimmy Iovine heard, I thought Tupac was dead, right? First thing he said was, you can't beat a dead man's cells. You can hit the jackpot.
Suge Knight, in a 2014 TMZ interview, had also claimed that Jimmy Iovine had sent him to prison in the 96 case.
Jimmy Iovine sent me to prison and stole it from me.
10 more albums of Tupac's unreleased music and greatest hits were entirely distributed through Interscope and partially released by Death Row following Tupac's death, which had generated upward of $400 million. Suge Knight, in his Collect Cool podcast by Breakbeat Media, has connected the radio theory into Snoop Dogg by claims made by Dr. Dre's stepbrother Warren G. Suge Knight makes reference to Warren G's Drink Champs interview, where Warren G had claimed Snoop Dogg had alerted him about the shooting over a Nextel radio. Suge Knight in his podcast said, quote, "The only way you would have a radio is if you was with us, and he had a security detail. By him not having a security detail, what are you doing with a radio? Why would you have a play-by-play on the radio?" Unquote. Suge Knight then made reference to bodyguard Michael Moore's claims in documentary Tupac Assassination, Conspiracy or Revenge of hearing the words "Gotham" come over the security radio during the shooting. Reggie Wright Jr. revealed that it was not only Death Row security which had a frequency on the radio, but Suge Knight's Blood Gang member Enforcement also had a frequency on the radio. Tupac and Suge Knight had one of the radios in a car with them when they were shot, which can be seen in newly released photos revealed during the case of Keefe D. Sharifa Knight, who was Snoop Dogg's manager, with their accounts being held by Kentron, claimed Snoop Dogg was paying Kevin Gaines's Ramparts associates in cash to supply security. Some have questioned Snoop Dogg's prior knowledge of the hit, as he had told his cousin Daz Dillinger, along with Death Row artist Corrupt, not to go to Las Vegas. Daz Dillinger had also revealed bizarre details about Snoop's comments to him prior to the shooting taking place. In an interview with Vlad TV, Daz, when speaking negatively on Suge Knight, claimed he could have jumped out at him while in Vegas, making reference to the shooting, and had said, quote, "It was killing me, but Snoop was like, hold on, don't F this up," unquote.
I could have jumped out on his ass in Vegas, but it was killing me, but Snoop was like, hold on, don't f this up.
Fox News obtained a confession letter which made allegations of Snoop Dogg's cousin Lil Half Dead being the triggerman, who featured a picture of himself depicted as the Terminator on his album cover called Dead Serious, in what resembles Can-Am Studio, which was Death Row Studio, along with people shot who resemble Tupac and his artist Yaki Gaddafi, who had been killed a few weeks after Tupac after he had witnessed the crime and had told Tupac's rap group The Outlaws that Orlando Anderson was not the shooter. David Kenner was contacted by Las Vegas police to arrange an interview with Yaki Gaddafi after he had claimed he may have been able to identify people in the car, but Gaddafi had been murdered before David Kenner could set the meeting up. The confession letter was given to Chris Blatchford of Fox News, who was also in communication with a confidential informant who had gave him further information about the theory theory. The confidential informant had told Chris Blatchford that there was an alleged gang summit held in Balboa Park, where the informant claimed death row security and attorneys had organized to put a green light on Suge Knight and Tupac to go and find a killer to carry out the hit. The confession letter claimed there were several barricades to block the car in. Suge Knight, in his 2018 interview with Michael Douglas Carlin, claimed Frank Alexander had told him that he allegedly had been instructed by the security to box the car in.
Frank blocked us in purposely. Later he told us they told him to do.
The confession letter had claimed that the shooter was Snoop Dogg's cousin, Lil Half Dead. A woman involved in writing the letter later had claimed it was a hoax to make money from Fox News, but several documentaries were made which featured a letter, such as the Tupac assassination series. In this video, we took a look into the claims which say there is video proof of Orlando Anderson being away from the crime scene at the time of the Tupac shooting. This opens up a different theory behind the crime, which Suge Knight himself has spoke on. Keefe D in January of 2024 claimed he had made up the claims about Orlando Anderson being the shooter. Suge Knight in multiple interviews has claimed Orlando Anderson was not the shooter and points the finger towards the Rampart cops instead. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, smash the thumbs up button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and press that bell button so you can get all the future notifications for when I upload. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.